We've all been there. Console.log lines everywhere, trying to figure out exactly where in our codebase we went wrong. But it doesn't have to be that way. In this video, I will be outlining the best ways to use the console to our advantage to help us debug like a pro. Let's get started. Okay, so first off, we have console.table. If you're anything like me, you probably work with lots of data in your applications, especially arrays of objects or arrays of anything really. And when you console log those guys, what you end up with is a long list of data that kind of looks exactly like this, and it's hard to compare one item to the other. And that's where console.table comes in handy. Now, let me just show you what that looks like. So we're just going to import books, the variable from the other file, and we're going to log it the traditional way. And I'm going to use button as the runtime so that I don't have to compile my TypeScript. And you can see that, I've got my list of objects, and it's, pretty standard what you usually get. Now let's just compare that to console.table, and you'll find that this is a lot cleaner. And yeah, so you get a really nice table, tabular view of your data, and it's super easy to figure out, what the titles are, what the authors are, all that kind of stuff for your data. And it's a really nice way to visualize your data in a tabular format. I also wanted to show you what console.table looks like on the console itself. And to do that, I'm going to bring in the same variable that we were working with before, this list of books, and I'm going to store it into the books variable. And if I console log it as usual, it's going to spit back this collapsed version of that data. And for me to go through all this information, I have to uncollapse and compare it one by one. Whereas if I were to use console.table, you're going to see that this is a really nicely formatted table view of your data, and it's super handy to use. Highly recommend this. All right, so next up we have console.time, and this API is super handy if you want to measure the performance of your functions. So let's just create a really inefficient function to test this API. All right, so we have our notoriously slow function, the Fibonacci recursive function. Just a slow implementation of it. And to measure just how inefficient our function is, we're going to call console.time. And here you can pass in your label to mark which time test this is. And this is really helpful if you have multiple of these running at the same time. We're just going to call this test fit. And we're going to call console.log just to see the output of our function here, the actual function execution. We're going to pass in 10, and then console.time end to signify the end of our function execution. And we're just going to run that. You'll see that the console.log output 89 as our output, and it took roughly 10 milliseconds to complete. Now the number is much higher, and it's taken almost just under 2 milliseconds to complete. So that's console.time, and the next one up is console.count. Now for console.count, we're actually going to use React because I found it really helpful for React components. So we're going to bootstrap a React repository. Perfect. Okay, now that we have the React app set up and running, I can show you how to use console.count. I personally use it to count the number of times a component re-renders, just for performance reasons. So to do that, what I'm going to do is we have this button here that increments the number of times it was clicked. If you click on it, we're just going to move this out to a separate function. Okay, now that we have the button ready, we're just going to add the console.count here, and we're going to give it a label of button rendered. We want to count and make sure that when you click on the button, that only the button re-renders and that the parent does not. And so to check that, we're going to add the same thing, console.count to the app level, app rendered. And let's just see what that looks like. And so if I click on the button, what I expect to see is that the app doesn't render, but the button does. And yeah, it just counts the number of times it has rendered. If it renders multiple times, it's going to capture all of that. And so this is super handy for when you have cases where you have slow, buggy components and you don't know which one is being rendered how many times and for what reasons. So yeah. Now for the final tip to debug JavaScript like a pro, you'll want to use the console.log levels. Now what I'm talking about with that are the various levels that you can log at. So for example, you have console.info, console.error, and console.warn. Now if I log these, you're probably familiar with some of these colors that you see on the screen here. And these are really handy, especially if you have a lot of logs on your screen and you're deep into a debugging session. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. But for these kind of cases, it's really good to filter your logs at the code level. So if I want to look at just the errors, I can cancel out all the infos and all the warnings, and it will only show me just the errors on the console here. If I want to see only info items, I can do that as well by filtering it out. And this is a really powerful way for you to log a lot of information at the same time, but also to be able to shift through that sheer volume of information that you're outputting. So those were my personal tips to help you debug JavaScript like a pro. Until next time.